I come from heritage that believes in a God that can break in. And this shit I've been given is actually like stealing life from me. But that is not the story of my mother or my ancestors or my grandmother. They weren't evangelicals, but God was real, right? So it was like very much an anchoring thing that I felt like I needed to state in the book before we go on this journey of like meeting white Jesus, so that like white Jesus is not necessary at all for me having a vibrant or a robust theological or life of faith. After I dumped white Jesus, like what was I headed back towards? Well, it was back towards a divine being that hears me and sees me.
Hey, this is Brandon.
And it's Chelsea. And we are really, really excited today because if you've noticed, there's someone else here. And so we're going to do like a little introduction for her before she gets to even share so much with you today. But if you haven't seen this book, this is Tamice's book. It's the person that we have as our guest today. And this book was one of my favorite books of 2023. I didn't pick it up till later this year, and it's just been absolutely incredible. And she shares not only tons of her own personal upbringing and her story and her trauma with the church and her history with what we often have referred to and what you hear about as white Jesus. And she also refers to a lot of her personal growing up as she left the church, or as the church has changed for her, and as God has changed for her. And so this book is just incredible. We'll be sure to link it in the show notes for you, and we'd love for you to pick it up. We've shared it on our Instagram before, but it is such a privilege to have her here with us today. And I know Brandon wants to share a little bit too, and then we'll get started with you guys getting to hear from her.
Tamice, welcome. I'm so glad you're on the podcast. Please correct me if I get anything wrong, but you're a published author, speaker, and trainer based in Richmond, Virginia. Okay. You graduated from Virginia Commonwealth University in 2016. You have 2 bachelor's degrees.
You make me sound real
You're 2006. 2006. You are young.
I'm pushing 40, Jack. I'm gonna need you to give me all my years. I'm pushing 40.
That's so funny. And 2016 would be a lot to accomplish what you've accomplished since then. So I'm so glad you made me correct to 2006. You have 2 bachelor's degrees, religious studies and copywriting. You also have 2 master's degrees. Tamice, what are you doing out in these streets? Contextual leadership, and then theology. And you're pursuing your doctorate in social transformation. How is that going?
Oh man, it's a blast. I'm going to United Theological Seminary, the Twin Cities. It's dope. I really like it a lot, actually.
And that's awesome. Where we met you is in Minneapolis. But I wanted to finish your bio with just saying you do a lot of work in university. Specifically in 2018, you founded Subculture Incorporated, a nonprofit that provides holistic support and crisis relief for Black college students. And you published your debut memoir, Faith Unleavened, The Wilderness Between Trayvon Martin and George Floyd, in February of 2023. So almost a year. We're getting there.
Yeah. We almost there. It's done pretty well too. I'm excited, and I don't know if I'm shocked, but I wasn't expecting this much success. So
what's it been like with the vulnerability that it takes to release something so true to who you are?
Yeah, I think for me, I had to be really preemptive before the book came out. So I did a couple of things. I had a party with a Zoom party that was like a prayer, spells, kiki, prophecy, whatever you do, however you roll, party to kind of like speak truth on me. This was on the eve of the book coming out. It was just like, hey, y'all know me, you know my struggles with insecurity and imposter syndrome. Like, I need y'all to like cover me before this book comes out. And so we did that. But then before that, I had found a somatic coach, which was really cool because it's different than therapy. It was somebody who like Um, her name is Emily, and she's dope, by the way. But like, she kind of helped me get in my body and prepare. Like, I reached out to her. I was like, look, I know myself. I know how I downplay myself. I know all the things. I'll get trolls. I'll get all these things. So I need someone to kind of like help me through this process and like not dim my light, not hide and not hold back. Like, I need like a person in my corner. So I feel really proud of myself in that, like knowing all of the shit I've had to work through in terms of feeling confidence and like not hiding my voice. And so I think with the book coming out and having those things in place, I've been all right with it.
Yeah.
It's been okay.
That's really cool that you gathered like friends and people that can speak into you like that the night before the book came out.
Yeah.
So special. What a great idea.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
Tamice, I want to get into your church history, but you got into it in the book, obviously. But like, we know that not every person that's like, you know, a part of our podcast community has read the book. And so we would love for you to kind of give a little bit of context for us of like just a snippet of your upbringing and what I mean, you're on the religious dropouts, right? So our whole podcast, our whole premise is people that have a connection to Jesus, or they have a connection and a love for God, but religion's just something that they've been traumatized by, or they've dropped out. And so we're just wondering, like, where do you fit in that mold, and what's that story like for you?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Like, I mean, you know, you getting the exclusive of like, I'm actually working on a book right now about how kind of Jesus led me out of Christianity. So like, I think in a lot of ways, I would consider myself a religious dropout. I think there have been so many walls and gates erected in the name of Jesus that like, instead of trying to prove that they're not there, I'm just not having those arguments anymore. Like, I feel like I don't need to prove myself. I don't need to apologize for the way I live and move. And so right now, I think, and what I'm writing the book about is sort of leaning into this sort of ethical spirituality. I think that that's where I'm at now. Because I don't know if spirituality apart from ethics makes a lot of sense, because you know, like in this whole new age movement and that kind of stuff, if we don't deal with the stuff I'm dealing with in Faith 11, which is whiteness, then it's not ethical. Then the spirituality in and of itself is not ethical. So how can we kind of create for ourselves an ethical spirituality that like, you know, embraces our own agency, but also appreciates and brings with us wisdom from the ancient text, from our own experiences, from other voices, but then also that knows how to like hope, you know, that like isn't so cynical that we don't know how to that we don't know how to look forward to the future without always thinking about despair. How do we kind of live in tension with both of those things? So I think that book in particular, Faith Unleavened, was definitely like a closure and a birth. So it ends kind of like right at the end where I'm meet my spouse and those types of things. And so I feel like that book is kind of a testament to past, and like the one I'm working on now is like very much like a sequel happening in real time. So it's been a lot of fun to kind of navigate kind of where I'm at now and where I was at when I wrote the book, because a lot of the book was past tense, right? Like telling the story of how I got to where I was. This is like, all right, like how am I? Look, I told you my spouse was gonna call me. I told y'all.
You did.
Every damn. All right, so y'all can keep that if you want to. Let me tell you. Hey, in a podcast, like I said.
Right. We try to keep it so real that we just let the ringtones go.
Yeah,
that really flows with my favorite part of the book. Like literally, I just told Brandon before this episode, on page 154, my favorite part. No, I'm just kidding. There's so much more about this book, but it's where Tamice says, I said it out loud. Oh shit, I'm gay.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I feel that. I feel that really deep.
It's
so
real.
Your wife, we love her too. You know what I mean?
Yeah, man. It's like, it's very interesting how like, yeah, even in the book, coming to know myself. So my spouse's name is Ellison, and we met on an app. So I didn't know. It's so funny because like at the time I was like, am I lesbian? I mean, what am I? So now I'm just identifying as queer because my partner is non-binary. So when they were kind of going through that process of like kind coming out. They kind of like downplayed the fact that they preferred they them, because I wasn't sure where I was at. We knew we were in love. We knew that like we wanted to be together, but it was real hard to kind of navigate who am I in light of who you're becoming.
Yeah.
And so it was like very much like a very symbiotic process of us learning who we are and coming into who we are. So yeah, Ellison is non-binary, transmasc, and uses they them pronouns. And I'm going with non-binary Black woman, because Black womanhood is an essence. It's a vibe in America that I'm not going to ever part with.
I love that.
But in terms of gender identity, I'm definitely like non-binary at this point. So I don't even know where that comes in, but now I just say I'm queer. But back then I was like, oh shit,
Yeah.
I'm gay. Makes so much sense out of so much stuff in my life. I was real good at purity culture, Jack. Real good.
Well, here's the thing. I came out earlier this year, but let me just say I was not real good at purity. So you're gay from either side of the spectrum. Either you were real good at purity culture, or you were real bad trying to run from who you were. So you could find yourself either way.
You're really
Okay.
stumping some
Yeah,
pastors
man.
not knowing where to categorize you because you're a queer that was pure. Like, so it's like
Yes.
you get a gold
Deal with
star
me.
in some things, you know, in other things they're struggling.
Totally. I love those types of
Oh,
conundrums,
yeah.
man. For sure.
But Tamice, you shared a story in your book that I would love to know if it might be something you could retell. And if
Yeah.
not, that's okay. But you shared that story of the almost car accident where you guys walked away, you and your mom. And I loved, and it was like that moment where I felt like it was the first time in the book, well, it was right in the beginning,
Yeah.
where you said that you started to say like your idea of God shifted. And that was like the first time. And so I would love for them to just hear like a glimpse of that story, and they can get the full story in the book. But
Yeah,
I would love for you to just share kind of that brief like awakening for you when that happened. I just love that story.
Yeah, like I think for me, the reason I tell that story is to say, like, I knew God before they told me God that I owed God anything, right? Like, I had this sort of very hodgepodge relationship with God. I started to see beautiful things about Jesus in scripture just from this one encounter with my mom in the car where we're like, I'm like, how do you even know God is real? And I didn't even know where a lot of my vehemence was coming from, but I just was like really annoyed about her crying and worshiping and listening to these talks in the car. And so I'm just like, how do you even know God is real? And my mom is just straight up like, if God is real, they'll show you. Like, no apologetics, no turn with me to Lee Strobel, no, like, because the Bible says so. It was very much like, if God is real, God will show you. And what was so dope about it was that, like, there was this sort of really kind of cool moment with me and my mom where she witnesses God showing me they were real. Because it was so, I think what I really wanted to know was like, you know, is God personable? Are they relational? Are they attentive at all? And kind of later on, I started to realize that there was a lot of shit I was asking questions about, even if I didn't know that those were the questions in my mind. Like basically, you know, the theodicy questions of like, where was God when all this shit went down? But anyway, so we're kind of driving and we almost get in this accident with a car that literally on the back of the car, it says God is real, like right at that moment. And for me, it was like, oh my gosh, like there is a divine somewhere that not only can like break into my life, like they're aware of the questions I'm asking and can break in. And to me, that was very much a very formative thing that I think at the end of the day kind of saved me out of evangelicalism, because I think I was reminded, you know, around 2008 when Obama got elected, I was reminded of this. Like, wait a minute, like I come from stock, I come from heritage that believes in a God that can break in. And this shit I've been giving is actually like stealing life from me. But that is not the story of my mother or my ancestors or my grandmother. They weren't evangelicals, but God was real, right? And so it was like kind of a thing I could like harken back to go, wait a minute, like the Jesus I met at 17 was completely different than the Jesus I met before I knew about penal substitutionary atonement and all that shit. So it was like very much an anchoring thing that I felt like I needed to state in the book before we go on this journey of like meeting white Jesus, so that you know, like, white Jesus is not necessary at all for me having a vibrant or a robust theological or life of faith. So that was like the main reason I tell the story early, because I want you to know kind of where, after I dumped white Jesus, like what was I headed back towards? Well, it was back towards a divine being that hears me and sees me, and that's on period. You know what I mean? So that's kind of why I tell that story. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love
I
it
love
too,
that.
because if white Jesus is what has always been, then you might have ran from the whole thing. But if white Jesus was
Absolutely.
the
Absolutely. Yeah.
artificial graffiti that was put on the Jesus that you've known all along,
Yeah.
then you might. And I probably shouldn't have said graffiti, but I just think of that of like the layering upon something that was beautiful to begin with. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And ain't nothing wrong with saying graffiti. I'm
I
a hip
knew
hop
you.
head. I
I
like
actually wanted to ask you. I saw that you said that sometimes you like contemplate over hip hop. What? I don't know if this is like we were just in like somewhat of a deep conversation. If I could ebb and flow a little bit.
Are you about to bring up
Oh,
my gym playlist or no?
please. When Chelsea and when I first rode in the car with Chelsea, we were youth pastors at a campgrounds, and this is short. But we get in the car,
Bro.
and her car automatically connects to her phone's playlist. And we're like, I just met her.
Yeah.
She's like, yeah, I'm a new pastor on the district and whatnot. And we're both like, and then her like hip hop playlist, her gym playlist,
It was
and
like
it's like
my white
the first song is like Party Up Anthem by like DMX or something. And I'm like,
yeah,
at
man.
one point taken aback, but then when you realize they're real people too, and and we're listening to the same stuff. Well, I wasn't listening to DMX. I wasn't that cool, but I did start listening to DMX. I was one of those Drake everything, and then but now there's way more than just Drake, but that's okay. So who is your favorite artist?
I might have given you
Who's
DMX,
someone?
but you gave me Eddie Mineo.
Hove all day.
Okay.
Jay-Z all day.
Oh, okay.
I like East Coast because I like lyrics. I like lyricism and I like wordplay a lot, which I think is why I really like Jay-Z and James Baldwin and Jesus. Like I love
I love that.
I think wordplay is so powerful because like kind of like the way that you can talk on multiple levels, just like in parables. Like if you have the eyes to see what I'm saying on all these levels, then cool. But if you only can see it on this level, then that's also cool. I just like wordplay for that reason that like you can go as deep as you want to go.
I'll be learning all the time. Like if I'm on a long road trip, if any other style of music, whether that's even gospel or pop music, I'll like I could almost get sleepy. But something about hip hop, and because it's like poetry, I'll learn stuff. I'll be like, oh, I can't think of an example, but I remember one time Chance the Rapper referenced Joe Namath, and then I'm like Googling in front of my dad, and I'm like, oh, like was Joe Namath the football player that was styling or whatever? And he'd be like, oh yeah, he was known for that. Like, and I always have loved that poetry educational aspect that so many people didn't give it enough credit in my upbringing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think too, like even it actually ties in for me because I think that that hip hop is inherently theological in and of itself, but it also is a very beautiful metaphor, and it's a helpful for me. It's a helpful way out for folks who have not yet decolonized, because what you have is this beautiful, uncolonized art form that arises out of the ashes of 1980s Bronx, which is basically like you've got something coming from nothing, which is the whole like, Augustine of Hippo, the ex nihilo type of thing. But like that's not like as apparent to me in anything else in America as it
Mhm.
is in hip hop, because white
Mhm.
people didn't touch it, white people didn't make it. It
That's right.
infuses our history, our love for rhythm, the power of vibration and sound and lyricism that is completely untouched by this empire. Now, obviously, in the 90s, white people get a hold of it, and white corporations who have power and money come into the hip hop industry, and you get shaking your booty and bitches and hoes and stuff like that. But in the beginning, hip hop was very much speaking
Mhm.
truth to power. It was very prophetic, like,
Mhm.
because you've got these voices kind of resounding on the charts that America made about what's actually going on around here. Like we are these voices
Exactly.
from the underbelly of this empire, and this is what it's really like to live here. And I
Mhm.
think that there's so much beauty in that. But then when you think about people like Jay-Z, I mean, I think about even, Lil Wayne and all of these folks right now, when you watch the trajectory of their lives, they're all talking about
Mhm.
spirituality now. They're like, yeah, I did the bitch and hoe thing. It was like Jay says, uh he says, fuck rap, crack cocaine. Nah, we did that. We're doing black owned things, 100% black owned champagne. He's like, we're going to merrily eat off of these streams. So he's talking
Mhm.
about how do we create wealth in the black community, but then he's talking about higher elevations of the self and like, how do you live in Babylon but act like Daniel, right? And
So
I think that hip hop has given us that in a way that people don't really understand, but a lot of that is whiteness. I mean, I don't know if y'all saw Shiny Happy People, but like there's a part in there where that documentary, yeah, there's a
oh
part
my
in
god.
there where they talk about not having drum beats because that
Oh
comes from
yeah.
Africa,
Oh
right?
yeah. Yeah.
And so people don't understand how anti-blackness is all up and
Mhm.
through evangelicalism. Like it is because the statement that they're making without making it is that Africa and Africans are bestial. They're savages.
Yeah.
They're demonic. And that shit follows all the way across the transatlantic and gets put in the churches that are built here. And so, of course, me coming into evangelicalism, like I'm obviously not realizing that I'm imbibing the poison of anti-blackness, but it showed up, because
Yeah.
around the time that Trayvon dies, I'm like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
what is this? Like, that was a real hard reality to get hit with. Like, oh my gosh, like this makes sense why like there is fractioning in my family. It makes sense why, I'm saying dumb shit. Like I'm a Christian before I'm black. Yeah, cool. You a Christian before you black till you get pulled over. That person ain't gonna ask you to respect the creed. They're gonna
That's
push
right.
you to the
Oh
pavement.
man.
Like,
Mhm.
I think like there's a lot of stuff that I think people don't realize. Evangelicalism kind of puts your heads in the clouds. And I would say American
Yeah.
Christianity in general, because it was, started by white colonial folks. Um, I mean, they killed people, took land, and then started churches. So you got to think about the foundation of American Christianity, right? Like
Right.
foundationally, they was already
So
off. So I think right now,
just
yeah, go
so
ahead, Brandon.
tightly woven in with racism.
Right.
Um
Oh
I
yeah.
I can't look at private Christian colleges the same way since learning that they were established when integration into schools happened. Like I
Yes.
even to the point of being at one this weekend and feeling uncomfy in worship and things like that, and because I'm like, I don't know if I trust you or not. Like I'm like anxious. I can
I love that you're telling that story, though. I really love that you guys are being honest about that. And I appreciate what you all are doing because you're dealing with
Mhm.
whiteness, which is still not something that a lot of even people who are progressive or deconstructing do. They deal with
Right.
like theology and like the church is trifling, or the church is a joke and all the cognitive dissonance, but they don't deal with that foundational piece, which means they go out and create different empires. And so I really appreciate you guys kind of saying at the root, we're going to deal with this. There aren't a lot of people doing that. So I
Yeah.
appreciate that for sure.
I wanna read this, like, literally my favorite. When you were talking, I couldn't stop thinking about this. I sent this to Brandon last night, actually, and you said 2 things. The first thing, when we talked about before we got into hip hop,
Hmm.
which might have been a better conversation even than the beginning of our faith, right? But when you were sharing, you said, I needed a theology that would help get me out of bed in the morning. And I just want to say that for Brandon and I know, I mean, we know our experiences. I'll never forget like getting out of bed in the morning. I remember we have a summer camp that we used to work at.
Yeah.
And that summer I had a black speaker, and I'm pretty sure it was maybe the second black speaker we had ever had. And it was my first year in a leadership position that I was able to do something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And she was a woman at that. And I will never forget waking up that morning. And Brandon, I remember grabbing you, and you were there when I got this email. But I had gotten one of the most horrific, like racist emails of my life. And I remember thinking in that moment, like, I can't get out of bed in good faith and like stay on this trajectory. And I never understood the way that racism, I still will never understand, but I never understood the way that racism even brushed our environment until I was the person in charge, thinking all I was doing was finding an incredible, very theologically sound, very accredited black woman to speak to these teenagers. And then within the next, and I had never gotten complaints about speakers before. Even I was very close with the leader before me, so I knew the emails we got, right? I was always a part of that team. And I just remember thinking, like, that's not a theology. And it was a pastor. The email that came, one of them was from a pastor. And so when you said that, I needed a theology that would get me out of bed in the morning. That's all I could think about when you were sharing. But then as we shifted to Trayvon Martin, I wanted to share this quote that I thought, and I'd love for you to speak on this a little bit and just your perspective of this and like where you're at. And one of the questions I'd love to lean into as we kind of get close to almost wrapping up here on this quote, I would love for you to also speak to, like, as white people, it's our responsibility to do the work, right? It's our responsibility to do the research, to find out, like, we can't ever be like, to me, what would you recommend we read? Like, no. We get that. But there is work that you can request of us, or there are things that you can leave with the people that listen to this podcast, a lot of which are white. And you can leave something with them that we can do better and that we can work harder at for Black liberation and for to support Black authors and speakers and humans just like you, and that Black womanhood you spoke about earlier. But I want to read this quote to get us into that, because this was just profound to me. It's something I had never thought about as a white person. Only 52 people were arrested on January 6th, compared to the 427 people arrested that were peacefully protesting George Floyd's death between May 30th and June 2nd. And that's on page 92 of the book we've talked about in this podcast. But Tamice, what was that like to discover that, to write that? Like, what?
Honestly, and I don't know if, trigger warning, but like, honestly, the first thought I had when I saw what was happening on January 6th was like, if that had been Black people, it would have been a massacre. I mean, they would have stood up there and gone and nailed everybody down. Like, there is no way you angry ass people are coming close to the nation's capital like this. Like, Black people could never, ever get away with anything like that. I mean, really, literally, they were tear gassed so he could go and hold a Bible upside down. They weren't being violent. They weren't doing any of that. Right. And then not too much later, you've got these people storming. I mean, just the
building nooses outside,
the foolish next to Jesus banners. And like, all up until George Floyd, they're talking about Blue Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter. And these folks is hitting police officers with American flags. I mean, y'all don't really, and that's the thing about white Jesus, is that it's not rooted. It can go anywhere. White Jesus is kind of like a thing, like a lucky charm or something that you put in your pocket that sanctions whatever it is you're doing. That's right. And because white Jesus is not rooted, they don't see any kind of dichotomy between Jesus 2020 banners, nooses, and praying scriptures out of the Bible. And it's like funny because people are like, well, not every evangelical is racist. Of course they're not. But what I will say is that white evangelicals in general, and white supremacists show up to a lot of the same shit together. I mean, they show up to a lot of services, a lot of same prayer meetings.
They fund a lot of the same organizations.
That
Yeah, they be
part,
paying for a
right?
lot of racist magazines. They be sponsoring a lot of racist shit.
They want the same people to lead the country. So this is what
That's
I'm
right.
saying is like there's only one reason for that. Either you're lifting that from Joshua, the Palestinian Nazarene, who was born in the Bethlehem that's being bombed right now, or you're pulling that from some other shit. And you got to decide where you're getting your stuff from. But don't tell me that I got to worship that Jesus because I refuse. And you can call me apostate if you want to, but that Jesus was built in ideology that is so determined that I do not exist, that I refuse to worship that Jesus. And I think that that's something that when a person recovers that level of agency, you just make people mad. Like, I don't let white Jesus send me to hell. He probably would, because fuck white Jesus. White Jesus doesn't give a shit about me. So he probably would send me to hell. The good news is white Jesus isn't even real. Like, you don't have anything to corroborate any claims that Jesus is American or middle class.
Right.
I mean, so they're
That's
really
right.
working with what they need to keep this thing alive is power and to shut down narratives. And you see that that's what's happening, right? Like, because it's not true. It's not like if anybody went and did historical or theological research that they would find a Jesus that sanctioned this, right? But what they can do is keep other people from doing that research by staying in power and electing people who continue that false narrative. And that's kind of like what I see happening. And it's part of the reason why I'm like, y'all can't just do deconstruction. You've got to do decolonization. Because if you don't deal with this whiteness is the thing, like, in the book, like that's the leaven, that's that hidden thing that's in everything in this country. Like, it don't matter if you stop being a Christian, it's going to be in the economic system, it's going to be in the justice system, it's going to be in all of the institutions. You've got to deal with that thing, and that will actually start making you be like, oh damn, Jesus was really talking about something about this empire stuff. Like, and so I feel like most people who decolonize are like, they recover a Jesus that's robust, because that Jesus was living in an occupied territory and confronting the empire at that time. And now Jesus and all the shit Jesus says in those gospels where people are claiming the things that he says, like, all of that shit makes a lot more sense now when you think, oh, this guy is from Palestinian Bethlehem, and he's confronting Israel, and he's confronting America. Like, that's the type of shit he's on, and that will change, I think, a lot of people's perception. And I'm hoping that coupled with the witness of indigenous cultures and people of color who retained their connection to land and spirit and ancestors, learning that coupled with a Jesus that is actual historical, could help us recover something that is, I don't know if we have a name for it yet. And I'm okay with that. Like, I don't need a name.
I feel that the like wanting something to be recovered, even though you don't have quite a name for it, because we don't really have a context to envision that.
Brandon,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no, Tamice, you're good. Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, I'm saying, like, I appreciate people like y'all. I mean, I think if you can champion that, it's going to cost you. But I think in 20 years, you create a vein for people to be routed towards voices that can help them have insight when more shit hits the fan. And I'm just really appreciative. I'm like out here, and I mean, I get flack for it, right? Like, a lot of people are like, I ain't fucking white people. I don't care if they're progressive. Like, but to me, I feel like, nah, like I feel like I don't have a problem. If white people are fucking with me, I'm fucking with them. So it's like, that means that, like, I'm going to talk about whiteness and I'm going to talk about white Jesus a lot. But I'm not a horrible person. I'm not going for that. And I think that for me, as many platforms as I can get on to go like, hey, like, whiteness is killing all of us. Like, whiteness hates all of us. To me, that's more helpful than just going like, I ain't fucking white people. I mean, what would be the point in that? I think the road for white folks is, I mean, Chelsea, you kind of hit it. Like, it's not so much like we don't want to teach you. We just don't want to teach you for free. Like, you can pay me to tell my story, right? But like, I'm not teaching you for free. So I'm
buy the book.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah. You buy the book. Join my Patreon. Like, I do theology classes. I mean, I do religious trauma coaching. Like, I do all of that shit kind of grounded in unleavened, right? And so I think you guys are doing really great work. And I think for white folks, it's pay people to teach you, but it's also like do your ancestry work. Like that shit could be phenomenal. I got so many white friends who are like, did you know that witches and pagans and all of that stuff, that was the Holy Roman Empire dealing with what it meant for European indigeneity? Like they basically labeled European indigeneity as wicked and demonic. That stuff that was connected to the earth, that dealt with healing through plants, that was connected to spirit and astrology. All of that stuff showed up in Europe too. It was in those European tribes that were connected to the earth back in the day, that the church institution said demonic, witch, pagan. But
They're
I mean,
still saying that.
they're
They
still
still
saying
say
that.
that.
The most
I'm
of my
like, can I
friends
get essential oil? They're like, bye.
that part. Like for real, I'm saying I'm loving white people coming back to that stuff. Like, yo, I think I'm a witch. I'm like, cool. Like, do the
Wait,
research on what that really means.
Tamice, we did have someone who hacked into our email and created a fake religious dropouts website, and what it led to the Church
The
of
link,
what was
there was
it,
like
Brandon?
one hot link button that said like learn more about us, and you click it and it takes them to the churchofsatan.com or whatever.
Woo!
That was
So
like 2 episodes
we are on
in,
the
but
forefront.
to Chelsea's point, a lot of people, because of the stances we're taking, the conversations we're trying to foster,
Mhm.
a lot of the people are really quick to name my best friend and co-host Chelsea a witch because she's gay and
Bro,
she supports black people and she's willing to deconstruct her faith and challenge power, and so
it's a
you must
mess
be a
on
witch.
the
But
street
you know what's funny to me is as the white dude out of the two of us, me and Chelsea, I don't get
Mhm.
called a witch.
for now.
Mhm.
I am I
Mhm.
am
No,
under Chelsea's spell to a lot of people. They'll be like, if Brandon would only uncover his eyes and if Brandon would quit being manipulated. So it's
Yeah.
funny, even the benefit of the doubt that my whiteness and my manhood is giving me even when they hate me.
Absolutely.
That's what's so weird too.
Mhm.
that's so
They're gonna
true.
come at you. They're gonna come at you for patriarchy and toxic
Or white
masculinity. That's how
knight.
they're gonna hit
I'm
you.
being a white knight and whatever. I get that YouTube content comment every once
Yeah.
in a while, but I'm really challenged
Sure.
when you say look up our ancestry because I don't enough. Because somehow my whiteness
Yeah,
has
yeah.
granted me the ability to forget everything before America. So I'm just American.
Right.
I by
Right.
default don't have to
Yeah.
know am I Scottish or English or and I don't know what I am
Yeah.
actually. So some of
Mhm.
my one
Mhm.
aunt,
I would actually
yeah.
really encourage that. Like I would encourage you all to do that because it roots you to something. And there are so many stories
Yep.
of colonization even happening in European countries that can root you in some type of story that makes you feel like you bring something to the table. Because whiteness just
Mhm.
is not grounding. Doesn't
Yeah,
ground you in anything. That's why you've got tiki torch marches. Because
right.
what will happen to my identity if we're outnumbered? You
Hmm.
gotta figure it out because that's a fact of life right now, right? So yeah, go ahead, Josie. I'm sorry. I see you.
No, no. So I have one, and Brandon, I don't know if you're kind of okay with this, but I kind of just have one final question
Yeah.
that I think Brandon. So Brandon and I have had this experience. I had a pastor that I kind of blasted on TikTok in the beginning of the year, that did a sermon. A white male pastor did a sermon about where he referenced how critical race theory is bullshit, and it's and that's actually racist,
Mhm.
So then fast forward, just this past weekend, shocking, that same church
I wanted to
birthed
ask
another
about this
church,
too. So this is so
and
funny.
yeah, I knew, I'm like, this has got to be something on his heart too. But and they had a black speaker,
Mhm.
terrible dude, right? Like just from the freaking trenches of hell, okay?
Mhm.
But this dude spoke also about he spoke about all kinds of shit, right? Like anti-abortion, anti-LGBTQ, gay people can't be loved or can't love anyone. We should hate them,
Reverse
crazy shit, right?
racism and
But
all that,
on his
whatever that is.
but here's my question though. I know that our listeners, because we get this question all the time,
Yeah.
and because they see it and they hear it, and this guy's content spoke a lot about how, and he's a black guy, right? So it makes it even worse. When it was the white pastor, we could be like, sit down,
Clearly
but it's a
sought
black
out
dude, so now
for,
it gives us less space.
Mm.
Definitely.
Mhm.
But what ammo can you give? Because what Brandon and I always try to do is our people that listen to this podcast, they want to know, like, what can I tell my white mom? Like,
Mhm.
what can I say to my white aunt or my white grandma, or in this situation, my black grandma or my black aunt? Like, when
Mhm.
I know that what's being spewed about critical race theory, about racism, like, I know that that's not true. I
Mhm.
know that that's garbage, but they don't feel like they're strong enough or they're brave enough or they have the right words. And I'm
Mhm.
just wondering, like, and Brandon, this might not have been your question, but I just wonder, like, what can you give them to be like, not only is this what you can say, but
Mhm.
this is the truth. As
Yeah.
from a black non-binary, but also owning that black womanhood as an individual, like, what could you say to them that's not what this dude is saying?
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality is that whiteness has a lot of goodies. So it's really lucrative to be colorblind. It's even more lucrative to do white theology and blackface. I mean, that will get you paid out here. And so I
Wow.
think people just have to know that that's going to happen, and like the fact that that person is really kind of out for themselves. They're not out for equity or inclusion. They're out for 401ks in a house in the Hamptons, maybe. Right. So when you think about that, what I would say that people do is do the research and find the receipts. Who is paying this person? Whose
Mhm.
staff are they on? Where were they taught in school? What were their influences? And I guarantee you, they're not getting any of that from people who drudged up and conjured up robust theology from their lived experience.
So
They're
right.
coming from people who were taught in white institutions, or who are on the payroll of white institutions, who have more to gain from keeping the status quo than from actually being prophetic. And so, yeah, I mean, you're going to have voices all the time. You're going to always have false prophets. That's what Jesus said. The point is, like, what is the fruit of their life and the fruit of their message? And if the fruit of their life and message isn't resulting in a more equitable, inclusive society, like the vision that was casted by Jesus, then you don't have to listen to them. Um,
So
but I
good.
don't think there's anything to say to, like, they're going to go away or we should shut them down. I'm just saying, yeah, they're going to be here all the time. There was always what we used to call house Negroes, right? Like, there's always going to be house Negroes who have more to gain from siding with the oppressor than like becoming one of the people that are being oppressed.
Mhm.
And those people actually have it the worst, because there's a way in which you have to cauterize your spirit. I think, Candace Owens, or,
Kanye
what's his name? I
West.
can't remember his name right now. But yeah, Kanye is on some other stuff. But like,
You just need some mental health help,
Voti
all right?
yeah,
Bakum.
Bodie
Yeah,
Bacham,
yeah, yeah.
like Bodie Bacham, Candace Owens, Jackie Hill Perry. I
Yeah.
mean, let's be real with it. Like, the whiteness that is rampant in that theology will eventually lead you to abdicating the ontological realities of being black in this country until you're hit with it. Like, until one of them gets pulled over or they have a nephew that's gunned down. Then it becomes really real. And I think at that point, then we have to ask those questions. But yeah, like, I think there's always going to be people doing white theology and blackface because it's lucrative and nobody is required to change. They get rich and the church stays the same. So at the end of the day, it's greed, it's mammon, right? And that's the strong man in this country. Mammon is the strong man, and we gotta, like, I mean, you just have to bind the strong man, to me. And those of us that are doing shit like Patreon and podcasts, like, help me pay my bills because I refuse to
Yep.
bow to empire, right?
Yep.
Um, but I do think that there's a way in which we can maybe do some, like, grassroots support of one another's stuff, and going, like, I'm not going to give my money to empire. I'm going to give it to people who are helping me, develop ethical spirituality in a way that I can sleep at night with my conscience clear. Um, and I'm for that, as long as it takes. I mean, I'll eat hot dogs in the meantime,
Well,
you know what I'm saying?
Well, we hope not for long. We
well,
hope
thank you
not
so
for
much,
long.
Tamice. On that note, I think that'd be a
Yeah.
great point for you to share with the people how they can support you, and where they can connect with you on.
Yeah, yeah. You can go to patreon.com, Tamice Speaks. That's where I do, like, most of my theo activism work, my writing and stuff like that. I host queer affinity groups. And we just do it's a lot of fun over there. But then if you want a tax write-off, you can give to Subculture Inc. That's subcultureinc.org. And that's where we try to take Black college students to and through school. So we feel like that's reparations work. These systems were designed so that they didn't succeed. These students have shown agency in applying for school, but there are structural barriers that they face that their counterparts don't face. So we're asking people to say, like, hey, like, help these students face a crisis when it comes up, or have living expenses, or have their tuition paid. So that's what Subculture is kind of ultimately
And
about.
you can donate to that, Tamice, right through your Instagram, right? Right on your bio, there's a giving for, it might be on Subculture on their Instagram, but there's one on yours too, I think.
Yeah. You got both Patreon and Subculture are on my Instagram. And my Instagram is Tamice Speaks. So,
and we'll share all that in the show notes
best
too.
place to buy Faith Unleavened?
Amazon has been the main place people go, but if you want to be given to like indie stores, you can go to faithunleavened.com, and there's a couple different options there that have some like accessible options and all that kind of thing.
Great. Well, thank you for our listeners that have came with us through this episode. Thank you, Tamice, again for speaking. Chelsea, any last words?
I just want to say thank you so much, Tamice, and I appreciate you. Like you said, I appreciate you fucking with white people. I mean, when I sent you that DM, I literally said, I'm just trying to shoot my shot because I stopped reading 80% of your book, and I just prayed like, man, would she just fuck with us for one episode, And so I can't express my gratitude for you giving a chance on people that haven't done nearly the work you've had to do, and just respect the hell out of what you're doing and who you are. So.
Appreciate y'all. Yeah. Appreciate it. I'll holler. I'll come back whenever you want.
We're holding that.
Yeah. But you gotta come on. You guys heard it. So go follow Tamice, connect with her on Patreon. And in the meantime, let's connect on Instagram with her. You guys, if you can go give her a follow, we'll share all that stuff in our Instagram. And obviously in previewing this episode, you saw all of her stuff as we got you ready to hear this. You've seen all those tags on the stories and stuff. So if you missed that, go back on our Instagram and you can check out the promo for this episode and give her a follow.
Bye, Dropouts. We love you.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Religious Dropouts podcast. Take a moment to relax your shoulders, unclench your jaw, and take a deep inhale. As you exhale, focus on releasing any remaining tension in your physical body. We're so glad that you were here with us today for this conversation. We hope you were able to laugh, to unpack some of your past experiences and trauma, and that you were able to find some hope to look forward to the future. We'd love for you to connect with us on social media and at our new website, religiousdropouts.com. And as always, we would love for you to share this podcast with a friend or anyone you know who might need to understand how good it feels to be a dropout. You are so loved. Have a great week.